As headhunters, they'll get an up-and-coming politician who they think may be president or prime minister one day, and as globalist, industrialist leaders who believe that politics shouldn't be in the hands of the politicians.
The globalists involved in creating world control have historically called their efforts the New World Order since the early part of the 20th century. President George H. Bush used it publicly during the first Gulf War.
Out of these troubled times, our fifth objective, a new world order, can emerge. Now we can see a new world coming into view. A world in which there is the very real prospect of a new world order.
The name New World Order raised so many red flags that it was dropped almost as soon as President Bush uttered them during the first Gulf War. The Commission on Global Governance was immediately formed with the full blessing of the United Nations. Its report was released in 1994 and published as Our Global Neighborhood in 1995. The report provides a flexible set of justifications and implementation goals needed to implement global governance. The report acknowledges that the environment is key to forming global governance. It states that considerable strides have been made in creating a system of international environmental governance to achieve global sustainable development through the management of cross-border environmental disputes and protection of the global commons. Man-caused global warming fits perfectly within international environmental governance. The report recommends, quote, "A carbon tax would no doubt be a valuable step forward towards a radically different system, one that taxes resource use rather than employment through payroll taxes and savings. This would recognize the need to discourage excessive consumption and would stimulate employment as part of a strategy of sustainable development," unquote. That is exactly what Al Gore and other alarmists are saying today. Somehow, they claim, more taxes are going to help our economy.
Yes, I know that CO2 tax is considered just wildly unrealistic now, but, you know, our pattern of financing our social programs and health and welfare programs on the backs of employment has outlived its rationality and usefulness.
See the payroll tax?
Yeah, sharply reduce or eliminate, absolutely, and replace it with a pollution-based tax system, principally CO2. I fully understand how inaccessible that sounds in this context. I really believe that that would help our economy, help our competitiveness, and I think it would put incentives in place to do the right thing.
Regardless of Al Gore's assurances, making everything more expensive because of a carbon tax cannot help our economy or individual families, nor can a cap-and-trade scheme that is also promoted by Gore and other alarmists. The Congressional Budget Office warned that such efforts would be, and I quote, "regressive in that poorer households would bear a larger burden relative to their income than the wealthier households would," unquote. Indeed, such a plan would be disastrous to the American people. This is exactly what historian Carroll Quigley meant when he stated that, quote, "in this group of globalists were persons whose lives have been a disaster to our way of life," unquote. How does this work? When he was vice president, Al Gore called it reinventing government through the creation of public-private partnerships. You have heard this phrase many times on the news, but didn't know what it really means. There are literally thousands of these public-private partnerships in the United States and around the world. The problem with public-private partnerships is that they shift decision-making from the electorate and elected officials to an unaccountable partnership of non-governmental organizations, government bureaucracies, and multinational corporations at the international, national, and local levels. Since none of these entities are elected and government bureaucracies are only marginally accountable to the electorate, the partnerships are free to impose their will on people, not unlike the feudal system, just as historian Carroll Quigley said in his book, Tragedy and Hope. All of this is driven by the deliberately fabricated need for what is called sustainable development, which include things like smart growth and environmental protection. The latter includes the Kyoto Protocol to ostensibly reduce global warming, but in fact allows control of our economy by international bureaucracies that will impose carbon taxes and cap-and-trade schemes exactly as the Commission on Global Governance and Al Gore propose. The partnerships form a neo-fascist relationship between government and corporations which creates monopolies, effectively eliminating most competition from small businesses that do not have the ability to meet the draconian regulations. Once this process is fully in place, there is no longer free market enterprise, but total economic control. Again, this is exactly what Carroll Quigley said would happen in Tragedy and Hope. It is what is meant by global governance and the New World Order. Lou Dobbs of CNN provides an excellent snapshot of how this is being done today and its terrible consequences on the middle class.
Tonight, a proposal for an expanded so-called free trade zone from Alaska to the tip of South America. It's a plan from the business elites, the political elites, that will cost more American jobs, cost American sovereignty, but it would fulfill the president's father's vision. Bill Tucker reports.
It's not a new idea. President Bush talked about it back in 1991.
It is a big idea, a new world order, where diverse nations are drawn together in common cause.
Now, former United States Trade Ambassador Robert Zoellick is talking about it again with renewed vigor. This time, a new world order with business at the helm of trade and economic policy, advocating what he calls the Association of American Free Trade Agreements, a separate non-government entity which would include North, Central, and South America.
What Zoellick is really proposing here is a stealth trade agenda. It's not a national agenda. He's proposing to set up what's essentially a private organization to try to achieve what he couldn't get done when he was the U.S. trade representative. And this is a business agenda.
It's an agenda that goes hand in hand with the United States, Mexico, and Canada, working quietly and behind the scenes to promote a common market with common deregulation for the benefit of multinational corporations. It's an agenda that so far has resulted in an increase in U.S. corporate profits of 45%, while wages of American workers have risen only 3% in the last 5 years.
The main danger raised by Zoellick's proposals is that the future of American international economic policy, which affects not only our nation's prosperity, but its national security, will be set not by the American people and their elected representatives, but by a small corporate elite that is accountable to no one but itself.
Effectively surrendering the sovereignty of the United States. And as justification for trusting those who would have the authority, the argument is made that free trade promotes democracy and the welfare of the people. But Lou, one has to look no further than China to see whether that, in fact, is true.
You know, talking about Zoellick's proposal, it's not Zoellick's proposal, it's Daddy's proposal. And people better understand that they mean exactly what they're saying. It's a new world order they're trying to create, and they're trying to do so not only without approval or consent of the governed in this country, but despite the popular will. This is a straightforward assault by the elitists in this country.
Robert Zoellick, the architect of the Association of American Free Trade Agreements mentioned in Lou Dobbs' story, is one of the many power brokers heavily involved in advancing the New World Order and global governance. In May of 2007, President Bush nominated him to be the next president of the World Bank, where he will have the quiet power to implement many of his ideas, including the new proposal advanced by President Bush at the G8 meeting in June 2007.
So my proposal is this. By the end of next year, America and other nations will set a long-term global goal for reducing greenhouse gases. To help develop this goal, the United States would convene a series of meetings of nations that produced most greenhouse gas emissions, including nations with rapidly growing economies like India and China.
Although the Bush climate plan is far superior than the Kyoto Protocol, it still begs the question, if the probability that increasing carbon dioxide will result in potentially tremendous benefits for mankind and the environment, why pursue the reduction of carbon dioxide at all? Could it be because it establishes a huge international bureaucracy which is not accountable to the citizens of the United States and the world?
That is very, very clear in these United Nations documents that they want to set up a regulatory structure that would affect every man, woman, and child on planet Earth, and all of the control would be headquartered in the United Nations. And if we take the more recent United Nations documents, it's going to be called the Trusteeship Council in the restructure of the United Nations that's occurring right now.
While these plans are being made for everyone else, those demanding that we make these sacrifices have no intention of making the same sacrifices themselves.
All right, now I'd like to put up the little pledge thing here. I'm going to ask you if you would like to commit here today. You know how many hundreds of thousands of fans you have out there that would like to follow your lead. And this pledge merely says, as you can read it up there, that you're agreeing to consume no more energy in your residence than the average American household By 1 year from today, not right now, you got a whole year to look to try to do this. Now, the one thing I'd like to have you not use in response to this question, which is a yes or no question, is the various gimmicks. Now, I have something I want to submit for the record, Madam Chairman, that talks about the effects, the offsets, and the credits are gimmicks used by the wealthy so they don't have to change their lifestyles. And I have an article that is last Sunday's United Kingdom Times. I'd like to add, submit for the record at this time.
You may.
All right. What's your answer?
Purchase wind energy and other green energy that does not produce carbon dioxide. That does cost a little more now, and that is one of the reasons why it costs a little more.
In fact, Al Gore uses 17 times